Well, welcome everybody to the Gatemaster June 2018 user group. I'm Brandy, your user group leader. If you ever have any ideas for user groups or would like to participate, please email me. We also have Tiffany who will be joining us for this user group. And today we have Joe Callis. He is our hardware technician. And I'm going to let Joe tell us a little bit about himself. Joe, are you there?
I am.
All right, Joe. So kind of tell us about, how long you've been working with Gatemaster and kind of what you do.
Let's see. It must be pretty close to 25 years, I guess. I've been doing work with Gatemaster. I've been doing point-of-sale computer systems since around 1977, I think. That would be about right. Which was before terminals looked like they look like now. We were punch paper tape terminals and things like that, but that far back. And it's getting more and more difficult to keep up with all the new technology, but I'm trying to stay with it. But that's been a lot of years.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen a lot of
Yep. A lot of changes to technology.
Yep, a lot of changes. And I've really enjoyed the last 10 or 15 years the most. It's been the most fun.
Well, good. Well, so today we're going to be talking about tips for keeping your hardware in working condition. So, and Tiffany, I'm going to unmute you. So if you can add in anything as we go along. Okay. So our first topic is proper storage of seasonal systems. What can you tell us about this, Joe?
Well, there's some things that a lot of folks don't do. I've seen some locations have real problems because, for instance, they left the server on, when the season was over. And what can happen is server updates or updates in SQL or something can get pushed out by Microsoft. And since there was nobody there at the location to restart the computer to fix, to go ahead and finish the installation of new updates, Microsoft updates. What happened is they had power outages also during that time. So that interrupted the updates, and so it ruined their entire operating system when they came back into the season. So if you're a seasonal business, you need to make sure all your equipment does get shut down properly, so you don't have any stray updates or anything like that happening. Another thing that gets missed, and this is something that people I notice don't talk about much nowadays, is if you're going to shut your computers down, and if they're general purpose computers and they're the server, you should consider doing a maintenance on your hard drive. You know how you can do defragmentation? You right mouse click on a drive, you can see the tools there, and you can do defragment. And the reason why that's a good idea to do before you end the season is a hardware disk drive, a disk, is a magnetic material, mostly cobalt, things like that nowadays. They used to be iron oxide. But the data sits right beside each other in charges of positive and negative charges. And that makes up a 0 and a 1 on the platter of the disk. So you have a positive and negative charge sitting on a disk beside each other. And what can happen over time when it's not in use is they can cancel each other out. The signal can get weakened on the drive. So if you do a maintenance on the drive, it will rewrite that information on the disk hot and fresh before you shut it down for the season. That way, when you start up the following season, all your data is strongly intact and still on that drive. So I think that's really important and often gets missed. And so also your LED, LCD screens, your monitors, you should make sure that they are put in storage at temperatures that aren't going to go real sub-zero, because it is a liquid material it can freeze and it crack and ruin the screen. So, you know, most of those will handle a -20, but if it gets, we have had some winters where in the northern part of the country we can get below that, and it will ruin a liquid crystal display. And that goes for smart gates too. Smart gates have those LCD screens, so they can get ruined from severe cold.
Is there any special physical packaging that you would recommend, or would you say just put it back in its box?
Well, it doesn't. No, it doesn't need to be anything special. It's just as long as it's dry and you know that if it's put in facilities that are kept above freezing, and most places have that because you know if you don't want your pipes freezing in a building and things like that, you probably have a building that's you know at least kept above 32 degrees. So. So those two things. And also when you bring those computers out from cold weather like that, if you have equipment that's cold, you should make sure it warms up to room temperature before you fire them up. Because what can happen is you can get moisture forming inside of a hard drive if you don't do that, and you can actually lose the drive that way. A lot of people don't know that, but that's why, you know.
Well,
too rapid of a.
Oh, sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Oh, I was going to say, you know, even if you order from Amazon, if you have hardware or anything like that, you want to make sure you let it sit for a day before you turn it on.
Yeah, you can get moisture condensation, you know, from a form inside the equipment that could ruin it. So. Those are important things that a lot of people don't think about. And I think the last thing I can think of about that is I have had people store terminals with missing covers and missing plates on them. And I have gotten calls that tell me that they had a mouse get inside their equipment. And I would say, well, how do you get your mouse inside of your equipment? And they said, no, a rodent mouse. So if they get in there and they urinate on the motherboard, that computer's gone.
Oh, and we will be talking about cleaning too. So, but that's really important because we've had that with Bokeh printers as well, where people turned in their Bokehs for cleaning, and clearly a mouse had been in there.
Yeah, I have one sitting on the shelf here. It's really sad. It's a dual printer, and that's exactly what happened to it. There was a mouse got inside of it, and the motherboard's ruined. The motherboard's $500 for a Bokeh printer, and it just wasn't worth fixing it. So I've got this Bokeh Dual sitting on the shelf here with no ownership to it because they don't want to pay to have it repaired from the mouse urinating on it. So,
I think you're better off buying a new one at that point. Well,
yeah, you are.
So battery power backups. What can you tell us about this?
Okay, well, everybody's pretty much smart enough to have these on their terminals and on their server. I mean, if you don't, you should. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand what to do. You need to calculate out the wattage that your system uses before you purchase these. Because they're sold as rated in wattage. You go to the Best Buy or someplace like that, they'll tell you how many watts this thing handles. But they don't tell you how to calculate that out. So your amperage times your volts equals your watts. So if you're looking at, let's just say, a card printer or something that pulls 1.5 amps, you take 1.5 times volts, which in some areas is 110, in some areas it's 120. So you take that, multiply it, and that ends up with your wattage usage of that particular part. So you check all your components, you total up the amount of amps, multiply it times volts, and you'll end up with the wattage that station needs taken care of by the power supply. Now, why is this important? I don't know if anyone remembers this, but years ago, we had a location where the computer kept resetting at random. I guess I shouldn't mention names. And we sent a new terminal down there to replace it. And that brand new terminal kept doing the same thing. And so we sent a technician all the way down to this place. It's over 1,000 miles away with a third terminal. And what we found it was, when we got there, was a Boca printer was plugged into a battery backup along with the terminal, and it was exceeded the wattage of the backup. So when the ticket printer turned on, it drew the power down and reset the computer. And that's what it turned out to be. And it didn't do it at first because the battery was fresh. But the batteries in these things need to be changed out every couple of years. And if otherwise you're getting a false sense of security. And that's what happened there. The battery had gotten too weak, and when the Boca printer would come on, it would draw the voltage down and would cause the terminal to reboot. It had nothing to do with the 2 or 3 terminals that we replaced there.
We have one of these at my house, and because my husband works from home a lot. And actually, we keep our modem and router plugged into it. So if our power does go out, we still have Wi-Fi, which is kind of funny. And also because you can keep it to charge your other devices, your laptop, your cell phone when your power is out. And you can get the battery replacements. We've gone to Batteries Plus. So
that's the best place to go.
Yeah, they usually have these, because these are very heavy, but they're definitely worth having for sure. And
they're wonderful. Yeah, especially if you have real bad power issues in the area you are, or a lot of storms, And but now also let me tell you about something about lightning, because a lot of people think that these things will make your system 100% lightning proof, and they certainly will help if you get a lightning strike or a brownout or things like that on the power line. There is one way they won't help, and that's if you get a direct lightning strike near your building that comes up the ground side of your building. Where you have a ground stake on the outside of your building. I do insurance approvals for lightning strikes in our area. So if a house claims they lost their appliances over a lightning strike, the insurance company would ask me to go inspect that and see if that's true. And I have seen where a lightning has hit a tree in a yard, travel through the root system of the tree to the ground stake that's staked into the house, go into the ground side power, blow the whole cover off their electrical panel, and ruin every piece of electronics that was plugged into that house. And if you have a lightning strike come up a ground like that, there is nothing that's going to protect it. It's going to get through. Wow. So there's no 100% protection despite what everybody tells you, but this certainly can help with brownouts, which is also a big problem when you don't have a true amount of voltage to run things. Brownouts can actually damage a lot of electronics.
Well, we do see that pretty often where somebody gets a lightning strike and their computer goes down and they need to replace things. So it's definitely worth having. So
we've had a couple of locations where they actually had a lightning strike hit a fence that had smart gates attached to it, and they lost all the smart gates, a number of them. And that's the ground side. When it hit the fence, it came down the ground side. So it came into their network system and went through the network. So, lightning is just a horrible thing.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings us to the next topic, backup maintenance and data backup.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get really lazy on this, especially some of the express customers. But there are free automated programs that will do maintenance backups on SQL that are free. And we certainly can lead them to those products if they need help finding them. So there really isn't an excuse for people not doing their backups properly. And the I think they also are thinking that this is just a way to back up their data, but regular backup maintenance also re-indexes the database as part of the process of doing a backup. So what that means is if you don't do a regular backup on your system, the system gets full of data and gets huge. It just gets really big, and it makes it more difficult for the drive and the processor to find the data and the drive to spin around extra time to find the data. So it puts extra stress and time, seek time it's called, and latency on the computer. So backups are needed more for that than just for backup, for your database backup. If you don't do the regular maintenance, then your database gets so unwieldy big that it just becomes cumbersome for the computer system to get to the data properly.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, that's great, Joe.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So cleaning and placement of hardware. And I'll be honest, some of the pictures on these kind of really gross me out. But the reason I put them on here is because this is real life. Especially if you have, your teenagers working at a terminal, or you're outside, or people eating over your keyboard. This is
yeah. You could probably replace keyboards cheaper than you can maintain them properly. You literally can take a keyboard and put them in a dishwasher, though a lot of people don't know that. But of course, you can't do that to the computers themselves. Now, I have, if you have general purpose computers that are still using fans, they have to open those up and they got to clean those out because they just get hot. They overheat. I actually went on a call here locally one time as a favor to a pet store. And I was able to open their computer up and actually pull out a block of pet hair, a solid block of pet hair out of a computer in one piece.
I believe that.
So, yeah, it was pretty gross. And I itched and coughed and sneezed the whole rest of the day. So, but of course, the fans get bogged down and can't turn at the right RPMs to maintain the processor's cool properly. The solder points on the board melt and lose connection to the submicro devices that are on the board, and capacitors. They're called caps. They look like little tiny miniature beer cans that sit on the computer. Those get hot, and the oil that makes them work inside boils out, and so the caps become where they can't work anymore, and so the motherboard just fails. So if you have solid-state computers, you don't have the fans, but you still need to have air able to circulate around those, because how those solid-state computers work is they use the body of the computer as a big heat sink, a way to let the heat draw off of the processor. So they need to have a flow of air around the outside of those bodies of solid-state computers. So those are important. And so you have to make sure that the vent holes, if there are any on those computers, are clear and clean of dust. So.
And there's tools, everybody knows about the can of air, but we have a plug-in one that we use that blows and sucks. And it's used, for a keyboard around the computer, and I find that to be pretty helpful.
Yeah. Well, we all have dust. It can't be helped. This is part of nature.
Yep.
Some of us have more than others because we have, of our environment where we live down dirt roads or,
Well, and pets don't help either. So if you do have animals near your location, or even if you're just outside, that can
Yep.
make a difference.
Yep.
So let's see here. So, well, let's talk about bokehs. This is going to be a really popular topic. So what can you tell us about maintaining bokeh printers?
We've been getting a lot of bokeh printers in here this past 2 years, especially since bokeh switched over they must have got some new engineers at bokeh. So what has happened is they've gone from machined parts, all machined aluminum parts, and they've changed to stamped parts, but they have not lowered their price. So what they've done is probably just increase their profit margins, and they went from metal bodies to plastic. Now, it used to be the main problem we had with bokehs was the failure of the sensor that locates the black timing mark. And that was the most maintenance issue we would have with them. And what that would do is make the ticket park in the wrong position. So it would start printing in the wrong place, or it wouldn't know where to stop as it was pushing the ticket out. So you'd get blank tickets. And that was almost a sure given that it was the sensor that sees the timing mark on the underside. So with these new lemurs, they've gone through several generations of those parts. So now we have to keep a bigger inventory of replacement parts to maintain these, because they, like I said, as they experimented with new bodies and different ways of doing it before they settled down, they came up with several generations. Now, what I'm seeing as the new point of failure for the lemurs is actually the roller. So either the old machines, you could adjust the pressure of the print head onto the roller. It was adjustable. Now the lemurs now are not. So as the roller gets worn or gets slick from the ink coming off of tickets, the roller doesn't grab the tickets properly, and so it either gives a ticket jam or it sends out blank tickets in between regular printed tickets. So we've had to change a lot of the rollers for customers. It's not real terribly expensive, and it's not very difficult to do, but it's just taking a bokeh printer out of commission when you do that. More so than having to replace the sensor. So that's a new thing that we're running into. And let's talk about cleaning these things. So if you're doing wristbands, the wristbands have glue on them, and they will leave glue residue in the chute that the wristbands come down through, and they will deposit glue on the roller. And that causes the wristbands to wind up around the roller or slow down and hang up inside the chute, which throws the timing of the printer off. So that glue, if you're using wristbands, has to be cleaned out of there as a regular maintenance thing. And you can use isopropyl alcohol to do that. And a Q-tip to do that, to get that glue residue off of there. And you can use that same alcohol to clean the print head. You don't scrub on it. You just pop that print head out and you just rub across it a few times to make sure it's clean. Print head is made of, just a word of caution, the print head is ceramic, a ceramic material. And if you ever see streaks in your tickets, long way streaks, the print head has probably been cracked. And the way those get cracked is when you have a ticket jam and someone decides it's okay to stick a knife or a screwdriver in there to pry it out, and they crack the print head. And that print head costs about $300 to $350 depending on the width. So it's an expensive mistake, so nobody should be prying on the print heads. Okay?
And you don't want to pull the tickets out either, right? There's a test button.
No, yeah, you can do a test button, or you can open it up and release it and pull it out that way. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, cleaning the roller. I've read all kinds of different things from different bokeh people about cleaning these rollers, and I'm going to tell you, they're probably not going to like me saying this, but I'm going to tell you what I found the best thing to clean it with. If you release the print head so that and lift it up out of the way, if you take just some Dawn dish detergent and water and put it on a paper towel, you know, it doesn't have to be real strong, and just go back and forth as you're rotating that roller around, it cleans those rollers better than anything I've ever used, and it brings back the tackiness that roller has, where it grabs the ticket properly. Now, I know they recommend alcohol, some alcohol, toxic alcohol cleaners, but what I find that does is eventually dries that roller out, makes it brittle and cracks and just ruins it. But the way I've been doing it doesn't do that, and it works a lot better. So I'm sure if they hear that, they'll probably cringe, but I'm telling you, that is the best way to clean those rollers.
And what about anything else that kind of comes up? Are there storage issues, or is there any other part that needs to be replaced often or cleaned?
Well, no, you know, I'm real concerned about the lemur line, but let me first before I criticize Boca, let me tell you that I have looked at every single maker of ticket printers, and I have had to buy them to do that. I have a warehouse loaded with Gatemaster, Precision Dynamics, everybody else that makes Epson, all these people that make these ticket printers. Ticket World, I have their machines sitting here that I have laid out good money for to test to find something else other than Boca, and none of them work as fast and reliable as the Boca printer. And the thing about it is, Boca knows that. They know that they've got the best printer in the world for doing tickets, and they're very complacent with their attitude because of that. Mm-hmm. So they're extremely difficult to work with because they kind of got bragging rights. They make the fastest, most reliable ticket printer on the market. They just do. There's just nothing better. So, but when they went from machine parts to then use stamped out parts, it works fine. Doesn't look as nice inside. Works fine, but I'm concerned about their plastic on plastic points. In other words, the roller now doesn't set in a metal fixture. It's sitting in a plastic fixture. And I just worry over time how that is going to work out. You know what I'm saying? Because plastic on plastic wears out. There's a wear point. So you're going to have slack in the unit. It's going to tilt the roller this way or that way. It's not going to square up. And I think that might be why we're seeing some of these come in with the roller issues.
Okay.
That's just my opinion about it.
Yeah. So you just find yourself replacing the rollers at that point?
Yeah. Almost all the ones that have come in here, I have not been able to cure all the problems it was having until I took the roller out and replaced the roller. Okay. So that's definitely a new problem with this lemur line. I think is we would almost never had to replace rollers with the old models, but with the lemur line, it looks like rollers are going to have to be replaced every so many 100,000 tickets or so. You know, it just wears the roller down, and the head doesn't adjust. We can adjust it tighter on the roller, so when the roller wears down or gets so contaminated with ink or dye from the ticket stock, it just causes it not to grab properly.
Well, that's good to know. And then what about keeping your and not just Gatemaster system, but Windows, whatever other kind of updates are out there? What's the importance of updating?
Well, I'm going to get a bad rep for this. I think when a season starts for a location, and if they're not seasoned and they go all the time, I think the only time you should do updates is supervised, meaning that you're going to sit there and you're going to see that the update goes all the way through. Update interrupts can really cause havoc, and we've had a location in Canada that I've had to connect to several times because the updates killed the touchscreen drivers. And
Windows
another
updates
location.
or?
Yep.
Yeah.
Windows update. And and also the updates, Windows updates, change the security parameters at another location, and twice I've had to go through all their computers and rejoin them back into the server. And it's because the Windows 10, which I think is a nice product, but is very evasive when it comes to Microsoft deciding what they want that Windows 10 operating system to look like rather than the end user. And that's where the problem comes in. So there is
you're saying
a Windows.
if there's an update, I shouldn't wait until Friday night and then leave. I should actually watch it.
Yeah. You should wait till Monday to execute it and see it all the way through.
And make sure it goes all the way through. Okay, well that's good to know. Well,
now there is a version of Windows 10 that's superior to Professional and these others that are readily available on the market. That's Windows 10 IoT. Now this is a very special version. It's made for point of sale operations like ours, and it's also made for things like the bill machines, at the banks, the ATMs, okay, to operate with. It's a full Windows 10, but it doesn't have Cortana on it. It doesn't have location where the system's located at. It doesn't search the entire network to find out if there's other machines that need to be updated, which Windows 10 Professional does. I don't know if you knew that, but it really bogs down your network because it's doing those things. IoT doesn't have any of those. The straight up Windows 10, it doesn't do the critical updates the way that the Professional version does, and it's made specifically for point of service computers. Now here's the problem. That version of Windows is only available to the manufacturers of the computers. So it's put on the machines, and if the operating system gets compromised, you have to order a new hard drive to come in there to replace the operating system, because it's such a security issue that it's just not sold. You just can't go out and buy that version. You can't get that version. You can't download that version. So that's the only downside about it that I see. But all the tests that we've done with it have been remarkable. They work really, really well. Mm-hmm. That IoT version. I'm really sold on it. But like I said, we're really restricted on getting it distributed. Just about can't do it.
So with Windows updates, when you see them pop up, do you recommend that people do them right away? Should they wait?
No, they should make sure that they're doing it when their volume is at its lowest or when they're closed down. And because some of these updates can take a long time because they're actually total replacements of the operating system. That's happened twice now. A lot of people don't know that, but two of the updates that they've had, like the one that added the new 3D print capability and all that stuff that we don't use, actually the whole Windows 10 was replaced with another Windows 10. So you can imagine how long that took to download and install. And if you don't have real high speed, that's really going to tie you up, because it did here.
Yeah.
And that's happened twice so far. They've had two versions where they did that.
And, even with troubleshooting, a lot of times problems can be connected to not running an update, whether it be Windows or Gatemaster.
Oh, yeah, that's true too. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, let me give you a good example. This is something that's happened recently, and maybe you haven't come across it yet. But there's one of the Windows updates. It closes a security loophole in the network that they found that was being compromised. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if, let's say, I've updated my office computer and it took care of that security loophole, well, guess what? That computer will no longer be able to get to any of the other computers through remote desktop because those have loopholes that are open. So Microsoft has shut down the ability for that computer to be able to get into other computers that have not been updated.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, well, I know. We've already run into this one time. I didn't know what had happened. So until they get all of them updated, they can't use remote desktop. Okay.
And and that can be a problem for some people. And then
Right
also,
now that's a new problem. That's a new problem. That just happened just within the last month. That issue. So you're bound to see it and hear about it.
And then and also just one thing to point out too, if you're having an issue and we do troubleshooting, if you haven't run an update, it might null and void all of the troubleshooting we've done because the update might need to be done to actually fix the problem with additional troubleshooting, correct?
Well, it's just not just that. Let's just say we solved some problems and then the update's done later, and it looks like we have a new problem when actually what it is that Microsoft has changed the security settings. Okay, on the system. Okay, there's some things. There's some things that may not work properly with the entire system because everything's not updated. We just updated this office computer. Now we can't use remote desktop. We just updated the server, but not the workstations, and now they can't. Now they've knocked off the domain because of some security change. And then there's Microsoft has push-outs, so they may have a security hole that they found that's really important that they close, and they send this thing out, and you didn't even have your updates allowed turned on, and it got pushed into the system anyway. Well, if your other machines aren't updated, when you turn them on, you might have a new problem. So.
Okay. I didn't even know that. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we're to the questions portion, so if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. But I've got a few pre-submitted questions from people who couldn't be here. So how often should I restart my hardware? What's the best recommendation? Because most people don't turn their computers off or their cell phones or their tablets ever. And then they have problems, and sometimes just turning it off and on can fix it.
Yeah, if it depends really on how long they use the product. Okay, if you have some locations that are running the computers, 12 to 16 hours per day, the more often you turn that machine off and on, the more risk you are of things like chip creep and things like that, so that it doesn't turn on one day. Okay, so for those, they're actually better off leaving them on. But those that are 8-hour days, 10-hour days, that they should go ahead and shut those off daily.
And like just for my office computer, I just turn it off once a week before I leave on the weekends, that sort of thing. Because usually, I do notice an issue if I do just leave it on for as long as possible. So, and then
well, you can have programs running in the background that are left running that you don't know are there, and of course, turning your system off and restarting it will clear all that out. So, that's one reason why you should do that. But
and kind of what's the life expectancy of hardware? How often should it be replaced?
Receipt printers after 1 million cuts, because the blade is what actually quits first on those usually. So you'd have to do some math to figure that out. Boca printers have the same issue. They can actually give you how many hundreds of feet of tickets you should be able to get out of a single printer before the print head needs to be changed. But usually you have a lot of warning signs before. They're pretty tough printers, and most of their parts are replaceable. So they, we've got some that are out there right now. They're 10, 12 years, and they're still working. But it gets to the point where you're starting to replace more parts than it's worth keeping them sometimes.
And I have a Windows recommendation I'll include in the follow-up email when I send out the video here that says how, what Windows recommends for replacing hardware. But do you
hard drives are the big problem with, with servers, because there is a limited lifespan on hard drives. They're spinning around in a spindle, and the parts get worn. You got heads that are sitting on these little arms that are going in and out to find the data on the disk drive, and all that stuff wears out. There is a limited time that they're good. Hard drives do need to be replaced I would guess about every 3 years, I would think. And otherwise, you're just going to have a catastrophic failure. Usually, there's no warning before that happens. Unfortunately, that's one reason why backups are so important. And then you might go out and buy new hard drives, and one of them be bad. I mean, that's happened before. So
yes, I've seen that happen before as well. In my home.
Yeah. And nowadays, they do have solid state drives, which are basically a block of silicon that data is stored on. So it's not a moving part anymore. And that certainly will make these computers last a really long time. We still have Sonic 1s. What is that, 10, 12 years old now, computers that are still in operation. I know they have them down in a water park in Louisiana. I didn't know they were still in there until this year, and talking to them, they've got a bunch of them still working down there. I just find it remarkable. And it uses an old 40 gig hard drive in it. So, I mean, it's, if they're terminals, of course, terminals are made with higher quality than general purpose computers. So, they have double layered boards, and they have a better quality of RAM chip in them than general purpose computers, that have higher ratings. So they're always going to outlast a general purpose computer that probably will only last they have 30, 60, 90-day warranties on them, I'm saying? So they don't even measure their warranty periods in years like terminals do. So.
Well, and so like, the receipt printers, the Boca printers, the POS stations, some parts can be replaced, but when do you decide if it's worth it or not? Does it boil down to the cost of the replacement part?
Yes. If your replacement cost, and that includes the shipping and time and everything else, exceeds half the value of the device, you should replace it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're, I'll tell you, a Boca motherboard is $500.
Yeah.
When you get done shipping and all that stuff, you're talking $600 probably. And so, you know what? You've just creeped up on half the value of the unit. You're better off just replacing the unit and getting a new one that's going to run you another 3, 5, 7 years.
Well, and you could replace one part and then a month later have another part go out, and then you're looking at almost the whole value.
Right, that does happen.
And you could keep that one as a backup.
That's true.
But there could always be something else that goes out on it down the road, I suppose.
Yeah. Right. And the big problem is weekends. Whether someone can get something repaired in time before they're finished through a weekend. If their business is really solely dependent on card printers, we have one casino that prints all their arcade cards. They print them instead of having them pre-printed. So that whole arcade is dependent on that one card printer. And I mean, that is one scary thing to think about, because card printers are notorious for getting dirty and jamming. I mean, if you have a business that's surrounding one piece of equipment, you better have 2 of those pieces of equipment. That's all I've got to say about that.
Yeah, it's worth it to have it on hand to avoid the headache. Well, that's kind of all the questions we have. Is there anything else that you can think of in closing, Joe, or Tiffany, even if you're still here with us? Anything you wanted to add, Tiffany?
Well, as far as, the end of life on computers, I would say you just kind of want to put that in your budget, kind of project for that every year, because I think that's something that, if you allow it to creep up on you, then you have an unexpected bill that you wouldn't have had if you had expected it. So I usually say
Yeah.
about 5 years, put that in your budget.
Yeah. I think that's a good number because most warranties will run out for 1 to 3 years. So, but in reality, most good hardware will run 5 years plus. But heat and fatigue on electronic components and the weather and different things that just wear it down. But again, if you have a seasonal business, they can go a lot longer because they just aren't that much wear and tear on those units. They're not going. You can't really measure it in years as much as you have to do it in hours or number of prints and that sort of thing.
Yes, and I also think that's determined by how they're storing it in
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
Because I went to a location one time and I saw this computer that was in this shed and it was covered in dust. I mean, literally all the computers were covered in dust because they were seasonal. And so I think that even if they're sitting in a building that is heated, that there should be some sort of cover that goes over them.
Sure.
And in best case scenarios, if they can put it back in the original box, on a, if it's not in a heated room, if it can't be on a pallet, where it's not touching the ground.
Yeah, that's true. It could risk getting water flooded if it's on the ground level too. You just reminded me, we've had cash drawers come back in here, which, cash drawers just don't fail. So when we got cash drawers in here, it's just like a big red flag that came in here from a agricultural type agribusiness, right? That we have a client. And what happened is we popped the drawers open, and what happened is rodents had they were full of hay. The whole back end of the drawers, on the back, in the back end, if you just open the drawer, you couldn't see it. But back in the mechanism and the springs and the solenoid, it was all packed with hay where, rodents had made their nests in there. So that was a real weird one.
You ruined their home.
Yeah, we messed their house up.
Yeah.
No.
Well, thanks, Joe. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you were here. I've been wanting to do this for a while because a lot of people have had questions, and we'll get this up on the website and share it with a lot more customers. But just so everyone knows, our next user group will be July 26th, same time, noon Mountain Time. And we're going to go over the new email system update. We've worked really hard on this one. And then the next E2 University will be July 31st, August 2nd, 6th, 8th, and 10th. So signups are available for that. And then if you are interested in buying a new Boca, their factory has an annual shutdown. There's one in December, but in July. So that'll be July 16th through the 30th. So we still have time if you need to get any orders in, or you'll want to wait. But just keep an eye out for any newsletters, blogs, emails from us, and for any updates. But thanks again, Joe, for joining us.
You're more than welcome. It was my pleasure.
All right. Take care. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.